Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Golf Podcast. I am your host, Andy Johnson. Today, I'm joined by Joseph LaMagna from Friday Golf, as well as Kyle Porter from CBS Sports and his own publication, Normal Sport. He does a great, often more than once a week newsletter called The Normal Sporter. I recommend everybody sign up for that at normalsport.com. But we wanted to do a 2024 kind of review of the PGA Tour. Now that the Tour Championship is in the books, Scottie Scheffler wins the FedEx Cup. We decided to talk about the PGA Tour, kind of the biggest storyline and where we see it going. Players we're excited to watch next year based off of their 2024. So we dive into that, and this episode will be there, and this will be the only one this week, and we will be back next week with some new pods. So let's get to Kyle Porter and Joseph LaMagna first. This episode is brought to you by Club Champion. Let me tell you something. Club Champion is a great place to get dialed in for your game. I've been doing this since really I was in high school. I mean, this is a Chicago company that started out of a garage, and it's a really cool story. Now they have studios where you can get basically a tour level fitting, maybe a better than tour level fitting, to be honest. You get to try out all the clubs, all the different shafts, find your exact combo. They have 65,000 potential combinations of heads and shafts. I mean, this is incredible. You do it with the TrackMan. They have master fitters that are like, they will get you dialed in. You will improve from this. So if you want to schedule a fitting, they have these studios all over the country. Use the promo code FRIEDEGG. You'll get $100 off a full bag fitting, or $50 off any other fitting. So if you want to just go get fairway wood, you get $50 off a fitting there with a club purchase. So if you want to get dialed in this year, go to Club Champion and get fit there. You schedule a fitting online at clubchampion.com. All right, let's get to Kyle Porter and Joseph LaMagna. All right, Kyle, welcome on. It's so nice to have you come talk with Joseph and I about the 2024 PGA Tour year in review. I guess this is like a year review. We're just going to talk about the overarching year. I don't think the Tour Championship needs to be beat up anymore. We'll just we're going to focus on kind of the golf that was played. What's your biggest takeaway from the 2024 year?
Well, first of all, did I walk into like a 15-part episode like the Shotgun Start year in review, or are we just keeping this?
No.
Okay.
No. That's just the year review on the Shotgun Start's really so that Brendan and I never get any downtime. It was created to keep us continually working.
It's for your spouses. Okay, so my kind of overarching takeaway is I came up with this phrase. It's unusual inputs yield uncommon results. So unusual inputs yield uncommon results. And I think that what I mean by that is you look at the guys that won the 4 majors this year, Scottie, Bryson, and Xander. I think Bryson's inputs are unusual. That's the most obvious one. I think Scottie is very underrated from a mental and emotional standpoint. Like his inputs there, where Justin Thomas talked about this at the Tour Championship. He's not on social media. He's not, he doesn't do a lot of the same. He doesn't use TrackMan. Like he doesn't use some of the same devices that all these other guys use. His inputs are different than a lot of them, and he gets uncommon results. And then the last one, and I think the one that honestly stood out to me the most, guys, this year was Xander changing swing coaches, moving from his dad over to Chris Coma. Did that happen was that at the end of 2023, I think?
I think so.
And so that's a different input that yielded an uncommon result. And it's a harder thing to do, I think, than people realize, to move away from what you've always done, something that got you to be a top 5 player in the world, and to be like, okay, I'm going to we've seen Bryson do this. I'm going to give this up. I'm going to give this away in hopes that this other thing will take me to where I want to go. And I think all those guys have taken some, I don't know if you'd call them risks, but have made some choices about their inputs that have yielded some uncommon results throughout 2024.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think like I would say that my takeaway kind of blends into that. And it was kind of around Scottie and his approach. Simplicity is what I think about Scottie Scheffler's approach. It's everything from it seems like his routine and his life to the way he practices, warms up. Like I've said this before on this podcast, but like it's that simple trainer, that grip trainer, right? Like if you grip the club the right way, like you're limiting your potential outcomes, right? Like if you just grip the club the right way, it really goes a long way. And then they do like setup work. It's like, Ted Scott stands behind him and watches his setup and his takeaway, right? And from there, like there's really limited, like he's limiting how much can go wrong. He's had the same teacher forever. And then I think in his personal life, you look at like, it seems like his life is fairly, like there's not a lot going on. And then, he also has very limited sponsors like Nike, Golf Forever. Like he's not all over doing sponsor shoots everywhere. From what I understand about Nike, they don't really ask for anything from you. They just want their logo on you. So I agree with what you're saying. I think like, especially with golf right now, there's like a homogenization of professional golf from like the strategy side. Like everybody's trying to play the exact same way. TrackMan is leading to a lot of similarities, what people are striving to do. And I think I really like what you kind of put out there, because it's people that are doing things different. And that's always what's going to stand out when there's a sameness, right? Like it's not surprising that like a craft culture has emerged in the last 20 years when what was dominant over the previous 3 or 4 decades in society was like chains and restaurants.
Yeah.
Like, like chains and mass production then yielded to craft society. And I think like if you want to be great at golf, you have to do things a little bit differently or be willing to take on some risk.
I agree. I think what can be difficult is that we tend to just judge whatever's working right now. Like Victor Hovland has tried a bunch of different stuff, and that hasn't gone amazingly well over the last year. So like, I feel like it's a lot of owning your process. Justin Thomas has talked about that recently. Kyle, like, would you say in doing things differently that is the right recipe? I mean, we've seen that go wrong for guys too. I get at what you're saying, but do you think sometimes we just judge whatever's working versus like if you actually looked at the entire tour, that might not necessarily be true of what leads to success? I'm more just playing devil's advocate because I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, I think 2 things. One, you have to do what works for you. And I think what Andy's saying is like where we're at with golf right now reminds me a lot. I'm reading this book. I wrote about this in the Normal Sport newsletter, but I'm reading this book called The MVP Machine that talks about the last 20 years of player development in baseball. And it has become very homogenized, like Andy said, where it's like, okay, this is what my swing angle has to be. This is what my velo numbers have to be. This is like, it's just everybody gets kind of pigeonholed into this, to go back to golf, TrackMan era. Like these are what my spin rate, this is what my numbers have to be. And I feel like there's not a lot of ownership of what works for you. And I think the second thing, Joseph, is I don't really begrudge, like, I think what Victor is doing, it hasn't worked, but I think as long as you, like Bryson said, can leave breadcrumbs back to where you were and then try something different, I think that's okay. Right. Like, I don't, maybe people look at Victor's year as a lost year, but as long as he can get back to where he was and then maybe try something a little different, I think that's like a totally fine thing if your goal is to be the number one player in the world.
I think it's like there's this, kind of if you think about innovation, right? Startups have this opportunity to innovate and try things, and nobody knows if they fail. And I think like what's interesting, it's similar to golf, is like if you're the 100th ranked player and you try something like completely out of the box and it fails, nobody knows. Nobody's going to be like, look at the mistakes that Eric Van Rooyen made this year. Like, what an idiot for trying this new method of chipping. Like, nobody's going to, be on that. But where Victor was a top 5 player in the world, everybody is saying, some people are saying he's the best player in the world and trying something new. And if it fails, everybody knows that,
Yeah, and I think that takes some courage, and it's where Bryson was. Bryson was like the 8th ranked player in the world when he started drinking, like, milkshakes every day. And it's like, I thought, the methodology was weird, but I respected a lot and have respected his effort to like try something unique to get to number one.
All right, I'll go with my first takeaway, and it's a little bit of a different direction, but curious your reaction to this. I think this was a massive year for seeing strength of field differences on different tours. And with what the PGA Tour has done in moving to the signature event model, there's a clear delineation between the strength of field at LIV, strength of field of the DP World Tour, strength of field in signature events, and then non-signature events. And it's pretty easy to observe in action. You don't see a bunch of guys having success at signature events and then struggling in non-signature events. There's tons of data. I'm not going to go through it all, but for example, the guys from the DP World Tour that got their PGA Tour cards last year, most of them have struggled to find any footing on the PGA Tour, especially in signature events. Matthew Pavan's kind of the lone example there, but
McIntyre,
yeah, he's won. He won this year, but in general, you can see this playing out pretty clearly. Major championships, where is kind of the cross section of golfers who finished in multiple top 10s this year. There were 8. 7 of them are PGA Tour players. Bryson is the one that is not, and he's on LIV. Similar results when you look at top 20s. The best golf is being played on the PGA Tour right now in signature events, and it's not close. And I would challenge people to come with some counterfactuals to this. It's pretty clear to see it playing out right now in real time. And I think that's going to be something that we just continue to see as the PGA Tour builds pathways into its non-signature events, and then if you make it out of there, into the signature events.
Are you saying there's a clear like tiered system now, or tiered like there's a clear tiering of the different tours?
Yes.
Okay. So how would you rank, like, if we say the PGA Tour A and B, like signature and non-signature, LIV, DP World, and Korn Ferry? How would you rank those 5?
Basically in that order that you just said. Signature events well ahead of non-signature events. LIV's a little different because it's super top heavy. But I think winning on LIV is probably right below winning non-signature events. I'd have to look at that a little bit. LIV is a little stronger than DP World Tour, but those fields can vary pretty drastically depending on the DP World Tour event and then the Korn Ferry Tour. We'll see how those graduates do compared to the guys that come over from the DP World Tour. I don't pull enough DP World Tour data to give you a firm answer on that, but I think what it kind of reminds me of, like when Dwight Howard could no longer hang in the NBA and then he goes to Taiwan and he's putting up 40 points a game. And like when Richard Bland goes to a senior event, he wins. Like this, we see this play out time after time. Phil, struggling on the PGA Tour, goes to the Champions Tour, wins immediately. For all the talk of margins being thin, they're generally not. I know that's a senior tour to professional golf comparison, but you can see this play out across all of these tours pretty clearly right now.
I think a great example of this is when a bona fide PGA Tour player loses his card. they usually
Get it
go
right
down
back.
to the Korn Ferry Tour and are immediately back.
Yep.
Like that is a real thing that happens with like, they do not stay down on the Korn Ferry Tour. If they still have the game and they are a legit PGA Tour player, they come right back up. I think like a great example of this, like, and you know, he's a friend of mine. I was like legitimately worried when Zach Blair lost his card, but he went down to the Korn Ferry Tour, immediately got back up, and he's been up since. Which is like, you know, I think like you see that with like bona fide PGA Tour players in the Korn Ferry Tour, and I think I would say the European Tour, their graduates have been like way better than the Korn Ferry Tour graduates. That's another thing. Like if you look at like the Korn Ferry Tour 30 players that got cards, they have not performed very well in comparison to the 10 players that got their card via the DP World Tour.
Yeah. I think there's also a difference in KFT guys, right? If it's one of the young players who's maybe ascending, then like Scottie Scheffler a couple of years ago, that's a little bit of a different example than a golfer that's in their early 30s that finally gets out of the Korn Ferry Tour. Like some of those younger golfers are going to have a little bit more upside. Like Davis Thompson's another example that I pulled. He played 18 non-signature events this year, finished in the top 27 times, almost half. Played 6 signature events or majors, finished 1 top 20. It was a T9 at the US Open. It's pretty clear to see this playing out right now.
I remember this was like 3 years ago when Hovland was starting out, and I remember he came over and they were playing the Korn Ferry Tour playoffs or whatever it was called, the 4 events in the playoffs. And you get, what is it, another 25 cards there, or you used to. I know it's different now. And I remember Peter Uihlein saying, well, we're playing for 24 because he is for sure going to get one of those cards. And that's exactly how it played out. That's kind of what this conversation reminds me of.
Do you guys ever wonder how many wins Scottie Scheffler would have if he wasn't forced to play the Korn Ferry Tour?
Was he on it for like a year?
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's number one. Like number one on the Korn Ferry Tour list. Like, I think he might have like 1 or 2 more wins.
It's possible. This just all feels to me a lot like college football as well, where like SEC teams are just dominating. If you get one of these non-power 5 teams,
except when they run up against Big Ten teams like USC, all-time great Big Ten institutions.
Exactly. But no, I mean, it's like
you're
TCU.
You're an SEC fan now.
It's true. Texas SEC. But I don't know. I think it is reasonable to draw a parallel here. It's like TCU getting to the finals a couple years ago, getting blown out. You often have these, hey, maybe it's because the golf courses are different. No, it really has to do with the strength of the field. And especially with how the PGA Tour has changed its model to a signature event model. We're going to keep seeing this happen where the strength of field just keeps getting farther and farther away from the rest of the world. Unless LIV's kind of the one example that could be a little bit different as they continue to try to poach talent.
Well, I'm glad you brought up LIV. I thought one of my takeaways from this year is their players sucked at the majors outside of Bryson. Bryson was awesome, obviously. Like he was so good. Bryson was kind of on the verge of having an all-time major year before he missed the cut at the Open Championship. But other than Bryson, like Cam Smith, DJ, Louis Brooks was not. I mean, he was like very mediocre for him. At Rahm was bad. Their players were, and I don't know. That's kind of weird to me because the talent is like you're saying, the talent I think is there at the top, Joseph, right? But none of those guys performed.
I think it's reasonable to question how much talent there is. I mean, there's definitely some talent, right? But people say it's a numbers game. They didn't have that many. They don't have access to the majors. You know how many LIV golfers played in a major this year? It was 26.
Yeah.
Like not an insignificant number. Dean Burmester finished in 2 top 20s. He was their second best player in majors this year. I think there is something too, when you lock up golfers for a couple of years, the game changes quickly. And if LIV wants to improve their strength of field and depth, they're going to need to sign a lot of young talent. Because like the Harold Varners of the world aren't getting better.
Yeah. I saw something about Asian Tour potentially getting more money and getting to like $10 million purses, which I think is a big deal for LIV. You know, like that's going to be the way they have to build a pipeline if they're going to continue to attract great players, like, and have a pipeline. Like they have to develop players in order to compete, because you cannot just buy players. And I think like the thing that I think is proving out is hungry dogs run faster than fat dogs, you know? And I think like that's a component of it. I think if I think about LIV, like, to me, what stands out about Bryson is that he has taken his money and put it back into his game. And I think that is he's a rare LIV player to do that, where like it can't be cheap to like literally build clubs, you know, one clubs, and work directly with the club developer. I couldn't imagine many players wanting to do that. Like most of them get paid by an equipment manufacturer to use their clubs. Like he is investing money into building clubs. Like that's interesting to me.
Yeah, it is. And I think the other one that's interesting to me, or that was interesting to me this year, was Rahm. Like people have weird opinions on Rahm. I think he is generationally good. I mean, I was looking at Data Golf today, and he's like the best player, like in terms of just strokes gained over the last, since he turned pro, it's him and Rory, and that's it. Like it's those two. And I think people who are like PGA Tour, like I hate like all this stuff, look at Rahm and they're like, he's no good. And you're like, you don't understand how good he is unbelievable. And he's the one that, to me, first of all, it's weird that he left, obviously, but I think him not seeming as hungry or as locked in, or he was odd this year. That kind of rattled me. Like I did not really envision that or see that coming. Some of the other guys is kind of easy to see, right? With Dustin Johnson's a good example, kind of easy to see like how that was going to go. But with Rahm, I don't know. I'm not totally sure what to think about him going into 2025.
I mean, I think I think there was like an initial relaxation maybe. And I don't know, it could just be cyclical though too. It's like, this is what happens with golf. Sometimes you have it and sometimes you don't, but it seems like the back half of the year, he has really figured it out. The last 8 weeks, he has played more to the level we've come to expect from John Rahm than before.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it was some pretty big overreactions to the front half of his year. He only had a couple of bad events and he was injured. Like I don't think that it was a disastrous year by any means. And I feel like in 2025, if you don't think he's a top 3 or 4 player in the world, I would question that.
Yeah, I think I agree. This year kind of threw me for a loop. But if you look 2 years ago, he didn't have any top 20s, I think, at the majors. And then he won the Masters the next year. So I think Andy's right. Like it is a little bit of a cyclical thing with a lot of these guys.
It could be the way he is too. Like different guys are wired different ways, right? I think that's what makes Scottie Scheffler so impressive, is like we've seen like basically since he turned professional. I think one of the interesting things about Scheffler is like he had a great amateur career, but I think people were actually a little underwhelmed with his amateur career. Like they expected more. They weren't sure how he was going to be as a pro, but since he turned pro, his consistency has been off the charts. And he might be one of those players like where when he was doing it for a living, it really clicked. Like, and this is my life. This is what I do. And it made sense, right? Where like everything worked better. And I think Rahm could be one of those guys that has the personality of like, I work really hard, and then I see the fruits of that labor, and then I have the success, and then maybe I coast for a bit. And maybe that's just the natural, like people work different ways. Some people are super consistent with how they come in and do their job day after day. Some people are like work in bursts. And I think like that the mental and personality side of golf and how it relates to the people's performance, I think is a little bit under talked about and under really investigated aspect of the game. Like, their different personality types are going to yield different levels of consistency, different levels of like highest achieving. Like, you could have a wider range of potential outcomes just because of the way you personally are. Like, it's a human instinct to get a little complacent when you have a lot of success. Like, I would say Scottie and Tiger, for that matter, are outliers in the sense of like they've been able to have this like extraordinary consistency.
Yeah, totally. I think what I'm saying, Andy, is I thought Rahm was in that group as well, and maybe he still is. I didn't envision him as somebody that would work in a burst and then coast. And who knows? Like, I'm with Joseph. I think he's a top 3 player going into 2025, but 2024 put some doubt into my mind for that.
Who are the players? Well, I know that's one thing that we wanted to get to. Who are the players that you're most excited to watch in 2025? I have a clear nominee, but I'd be interested to hear who you guys are most excited to see next year.
So
I'll let Kyle lead off here.
Yeah, mine is actually I think the question was getting at like a Nick Dunlap or an Akshay or somebody like that. Mine's actually Scottie Scheffler. And I think the reason is because I think 2025 is a tell of like, okay, are you a great player or are you like historically good? Right. And maybe we're already there. Maybe we don't need to see any more. But I think we've seen these 2-year bursts from guys where they win a bunch. And then, like, we saw it from even somebody like a Padraig Harrington, right? It was 18 months, 24 months, whatever. And then you can't, Andy talks about this a lot. You can't maintain it at that level for any longer than that. And if you can do so, then you're historically good. Like, Scottie Scheffler might be one of the 15 best players of all time, but he's not there yet. He's not even close to there yet. He has to put together 3, 4, 5 more seasons that are at least somewhat in the ballpark of this year. And then we can kind of talk about that or get there. So I'm most looking forward to seeing like, okay, what's your floor? Because it seems insanely high right now, but is there a come down off of the last kind of 2 years of success?
I mean, I agree. I think it's one of the more fascinating aspects. Like, I have a couple others that I'm going to kind of like that I had circled, but I agree completely that Scottie is the most like, this is one of the most dominant seasons we've ever seen. And if he backs it up with another dominant season, then we're starting to talk about, is this one of the most dominant players we've ever seen in modern golf?
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to do it 1 year. Like, we've seen like really good 18-month bursts from a lot of players, whether it's Spieth, whether it's Jason Day, Rory's had some like incredible ones. Yeah, JT. We haven't really seen a 36-month burst since Tiger or Phil or Ernie. I guess Rory. I would say Rory's probably in that. I mean,
yeah, but
he's
Rory
been so good for like 10 years.
He did it, or he has done it for a long time, but it wasn't quite like his floor. I think was a little bit lower than what Scottie's is at like currently, and maybe Scottie's averages out to being about where Rory's is, but it's higher right now, which is crazy.
This isn't my player that I picked, but I think closely coupled with that, Kyle, is Xander Schauffele, who's kind of been not neck and neck with Scottie. He's a step below, but Xander Schauffele is still young enough that he could play at a level where we'd be, if it weren't against Scottie, we'd be talking about him as not one of the most dominant players of the 21st century, but a very good, consistent player. If he wins more majors, if he wins a major next year and Scottie doesn't, like that's not going to surprise anybody. So I feel like that's another name that you'd have to consider in that same bucket of, could Xander Schauffele be maybe not a generational player, but one of the best players of the 21st century?
Yeah, totally. And I think KVV had this tweet from like right after the Open where he said maybe we shouldn't like judge whether players are clutch until like after their careers are over, because and I've said it a bunch, like everybody was like, oh, Xander, house cat, can't win, all this stuff, and then he goes out and he kind of shuts down 2 majors that were very competitive, and you're like, okay, I think about Xander a lot differently than I did even a year ago, certainly than 2 or 3 years ago. And so if this is the true Xander, like what we're in now, what is he capable? Like, could he win 3, 4, 5 majors? I think you're right. I think that's a very interesting one. And the race among the current group of players, JT, if you still want to throw Spieth in there post injury, Rory, Rahm, Scheffler,
Brooks.
Xander, all those guys, Brooks, to get to like 6 majors is really interesting.
Are all those names interesting? Is JT part of that?
I don't know if JT's part of it.
Yeah,
maybe not.
JT's part of that.
Like JT's done winning majors.
I think one of the things that's hard about golf today, and it's hard to be an enduring talent, is if your game is predicated around like JT, I think is an interesting. I think Ricky Fowler had a similar thing happen to him, where they were not extraordinarily long, but were very long, and like about like distance was like a big plus, but not a freak plus. And I think like freakish length is like DJ, Rory, like Bubba Watson,
Bryson.
Like if you're just like a plus, you become average. And when you lose that, like I pick up a half a shot and now I'm down to a quarter, it's like could be like a career crippling blow, to where like when Ricky came out on tour, he was like top 20 driving distance.
Yeah.
Now he's like average, know? And I think like JT has had something similar, like kind of profiled same way in terms of driving distance, was like very long, top 20. And now it's kind of like, okay, like how do you make that up? Especially with JT, like he's like a very bad putter. And when you have like a clear deficiency, I think this is what interests me so much about Xander. There are no deficiencies across the board. And to me, that game ages really well. When you are, top 10 driver of the golf ball, top 10 iron player, and then, top 40 in the other 2 categories, like floors, that profiles so well. Because like you're not gonna, like Scottie profiles so well because I think like we saw it at the Tour Championship. I couldn't believe how far he was hitting the ball. Like I think there's more speed in the tank there. Like he could get longer.
For Scottie or Xander?
Scottie.
Yeah. I mean, Xander got
kind of pivoted there. Like Xander got a lot longer. Like I think Scottie could get a lot longer, but that iron play is like so extraordinary. Short game's so extraordinary. Yeah. I mean, the putter is kind of the variable with Scottie, but I don't know. That's like why I kind of like JT. I think we might be out on it. And if you look at his career, we're at like 10 years.
So I think the thing that worries me about JT is the putting's, it was bad and it got worse somehow. And this kind of goes along with what Andy's saying. The speed with which he swings, it's like, can you do that when you're 41? Not just the speed, but the like ferociousness with which he goes after the ball. It just is like, I don't know how, like, does that hold up and maybe I'm an idiot, and I mean I am, and I don't know like how the biomechanics work, but I'm just that part about JT's game intrigues me. What's the comp for Xander's career? Do you guys have a good, like, off the top of your head, doesn't like is great at every category and is kind of like matured his way into being able to win majors comp?
I mean, I think the thing that's underrated about Xander is like of active players, there's not really anybody that's been in the top 10 in the world rankings that much longer than like if JT doesn't get back in the top 10 in the world rankings, he'll have been in the top 10 in the world rankings for longer than Justin Thomas next year.
Yeah.
Like he's already passed Jordan Spieth in that bucket. He's passed Jason Day. Or he'll pass Jason Day by the end of the year. Like you start to like I think like the thing that's just shocking about Xander is just he's been really good for a really long time. Everybody likes to throw out like Phil Mickelson comps, but I think that one might be the one that makes sense. Like not from a game, not from a personality standpoint. Like not the way they play golf is different, but from a like career arc, maybe that's it. Like lots of close calls, lots of contention, then wins, and could the floodgates open up?
I was thinking Davis Love, but I don't remember his all around game. Like I just wasn't paying as much attention back when he was great and I was young, but not the biggest personality, not the best quote, but just like kind of does everything well, wins a bunch. I think what's interesting about Xander, Andy, is when you have a guy that comes close to winning and doesn't win, until he wins, he is like, oh, can't get it done. But then as soon as he wins, like this year, Xander winning 2 majors, we look backward on that career and we're like, oh, it almost validates all the near misses to where you're like, look at all these top 5s this guy's had. This guy's been unbelievable for a long time. Like it's weird how winning 1 or 2 changes the entire perspective of how you look at a guy's resume.
All right, I'll go with my player to watch. Kyle, you already mentioned it, but I think Nick Dunlap was a massive story from this year. And to see somebody win twice on the PGA Tour, not signature events, so again, not at that top level baseline, but Nick Dunlap's 20 years old and he won twice on tour this year. He's going to be in all the signature events next year. There aren't that many golfers between 20 and 26, 27 to get super excited about. Akshay is another one that you mentioned, Kyle. But Nick Dunlap could develop for 3 years, still be on the young end of the spectrum, and be a top player on tour. I think watching his development is going to be fascinating. I know that's not a sleeper name, as you kind of alluded to, Kyle, but I think that's got to be one of the most exciting prospects in professional golf, the most exciting prospect in professional golf. I'm really excited to see what he does in 2025. What are your expectations for him, Andy?
I think like what interests me about Nick Dunlap is like everything with college golf now with the PGA Tour U system is pushing kids to stay in school. I think there's a massive advantage if you can make it directly to the PGA Tour at age 20, playing on the PGA Tour and developing, like you are just playing at a different level of golf than college golf. I know college golf is great. It's the best it's ever been. The programs are incredible. The facilities are incredible, but they do not compare to like what Nick Dunlap's getting out of like, oh, I'm playing alongside of Scottie Scheffler, Rory McIlroy. Like, like this is a different level. And to be there effectively now for 2+ years earlier than his counterparts in his age group, that is a huge advantage. Like we saw Luke Clanton basically played like the PGA Tour this summer.
Yeah.
I think if Luke Clanton, if you gave Luke Clanton a full-time PGA Tour card, would he stay and play the PGA Tour? I think you would, right? You'd be crazy not to. It's a better, like, I think about this also with like Joaquin Niemann and stuff. Like Joaquin Niemann's like shockingly young. And it's because he's been playing on the PGA Tour since he was 19.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is like, you get to the point where we get so excited about Ludwig, right? Or we'll be so excited about Michael Thorbjornsen next year when he plays really well in an event. And it's like, if you fast forward 2 to 3 years, and let's just say Nick Dunlap's got 4 wins, someone in his age group is first year as a PGA Tour player, wins an event, and it's like the sky's the limit. It's like, well, they're three wins behind Nick Dunlap, and all these top 5s, all these top 10s, like they are miles behind.
Yeah,
I think there's, again, like it kind of ties to what we talked about at the top about when the system is all pushing people to stay in school because of the starts and the guaranteed Korn Ferry Tour status. There's a huge opportunity for people that do things differently. And Nick Dunlap, obviously, he wins and he gets a full card and like access into the signature events. Like that's like a unique situation. But I'd be really interested in the next 19-year-old phenom that says, I'm not staying in school. I'm going to go turn pro, and where they get to. Like, I think there is advantages to doing things just differently than everybody else in your peer
it's
group.
like, I mean, it's Akshay, right? He did that at 17. He said, I'm not even going to go to school. And if you look at his progression, we don't have the 3 years of numbers on Dunlap yet. But if you look at Akshay's progression, 2 years ago, he's a -1 strokes gain guy. Last year, he's a 0. And this year, he's a +1. And that sort of like linear, like progression is crazy. Like what I'm saying is I don't think you can get that much better that quickly. Like Andy was saying, when you're still in college. So would I tell my own kid to go do that? I don't know. I don't know if that's like the best lifestyle or the most like the best thing for you as an individual. But I think if we're only evaluating like what's the best way for me to get as good as I can as quickly as possible, then absolutely, I think what Andy's saying is correct.
So Akshay is 1.5 years younger than Ludwig. Would you be shocked if Akshay in a year, let's just say a year, so basically when Ludwig burst on the scene, if Akshay was a top 10 player in the world?
Surprised, yes. Not shocked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's like the thing about youth, right? Like I think Ludwig's probably a better player. Maybe. I think he is a better player right now.
Definitely. But
the improvement year over year with Akshay is incredible, and he's still only 22 years old.
Yes.
But I don't think it's a no-brainer to turn pro either if you're in Nick Dunlap's shoes. And there are golfers like Colin Morikawa who's stayed and developed, and there's not as much pressure as you're developing. The level you're playing at isn't as high, but there's a little bit more of a safety net. I don't think it's a no-brainer to turn pro if you're Dunlap. So I agree with you that it's going to be interesting to see the golfers who take different paths right now. It's extremely competitive. If Nick Dunlap bogeys the 18th hole at the St. Jude, he's not in signature events next year. And things look a little bit different for him, probably reflecting on his decision. Might still have done the same thing, but I don't think this is a foregone conclusion that every golfer who wins is just going to take his PGA Tour card. Some of them are probably going to elect to go back to school and spend more time in school like Gordon Sargent is.
I think we're going to see more of these players contending. I think that's like one of the things that you could watch for next year is that in the next couple of years, I think we saw the amateur winning coming for the last like 5 or 6 years. It's been like very clear. The level of college golf is getting better and better, and there are more and more guys. Like if you look at like, for example, this Blades Brown kid who's medaled in the U.S. Junior and the USAM, and he is like 16 years old. Like that is a high level of golf, and there are just more of these kids coming. So I think it's interesting. That's going to be like more and more of a discourse and topic of discussion is like, what do you do if you're one of these kids? I think the other aspect of what's pushing them to stay in school is the NIL money. There's significant NIL money in golf, and you're not just like playing with free clubs anymore. Like these kids are making money. Like I'm sure that the mortgage company that sponsored Luke Clanton got a good deal. It's all over the place this
One
year.
of my favorite tweets of this year was somebody was talking about Blades Brown and his brother Cavity Back Brown or something like that.
That'd be tough if you were Cavity Back Brown. My guys to watch. I have two. I'm just gonna say both of them. They're both Scandinavian, so I think that counts. I'm cheating. Ludwig Oberg. Sorry, they really botched the name from the start. You know,
you're victim blaming.
I am victim blaming. Sensational first year. Obviously, the knee was a problem coming down the back half of the year. This was his first go around. This was his first trip around these golf courses. Playing on the PGA Tour gets easier because you're not like learning new golf courses. Like it's an advantage when you've played all the golf courses a couple times. So like he's a top 5 player in the world now. I mean, if you add the LIV guys in, maybe he's a top 8 player in the world. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Where does he go from here? Extraordinary stat profile in terms of like game. I think like what you talked about, Kyle, with like the golf swing of Justin Thomas and maybe it not being, you know, how does he swing like that at age 41? I think Ludwig Oberg can swing the way he swings at age 41, right?
61, like, yeah, all of it.
Like it is just like a beautiful, effortless swing. Seems very simple. So I just think like in terms of like where does he go from here, knowing that this is the hardest year of PGA Tour golf that he's ever going to have, because like, you know, Augusta National, contending at Augusta National as a first timer, that's hard to do. Augusta National gets a little bit easier every time you go back because you know where to put the ball and everything. Like you have that experience of like, I know like he's not going to miss left on 11. I'll tell you that much. He's not going to miss left on 11 again. So Ludwig, and then the other one, I think this just from like a human interest, a golf interest story, Viktor Hovland, like coming back after a like, as he said, a very bad year. So I think like that's just like a very compelling thing to watch. I think like another one that I would throw in there that aren't like Xander or Scottie, Wyndham Clark. Like what is Wyndham Clark?
Yeah.
Like I think like from in terms of like opinion and how people feel about a player, I don't know if anybody's had more swings of like Wyndham wins the US Open. It's like, what an amazing story. What an ascending player. And then he wins at Pebble, and it's like, wait, is he the best player in the world? Then we get to like the playoffs, and it's like, this guy stinks. He's terrible. He's a complete imposter. Like he should have to give back. Like, you know, it gets to the point where it's like he should have to give back his US Open trophy. But then he has like a really nice playoffs, and it's like, okay. I think he's just like a high variance player that's kind of fun because you see the swings and you know, I know this is I'm just throwing out a bunch of names, but like I think next year Bryson DeChambeau's a fascinating player.
Yeah. The Ludwig thing is interesting because he's almost like a Joe Burrow, where he's awesome in college and then he comes out and he's awesome right away in the pro, like as a professional. But then it gets harder to imagine his ceiling being that much higher. In the same way, like if we compare it to Akshay or Dunlap, you're like, oh, of course their ceiling could be anything, right? It's the like Akshay and Dunlap are the, you know, 6'9" Serbian that we haven't seen in the NBA. It's like, well, who knows? Might be the next Luke. Could be whatever. And Ludwig, you're kind of like, I think I know what this is. And so I think what I'm saying is it gets a little bit harder to get excited about what that ceiling is. Cause I think I don't know if we're at it, but I think this is just like who he is. Now that could mean he wins 2 or 3 majors. He wins a bunch on the PGA Tour. I think it's, him and Morikawa were probably the 2 best players this year that didn't win. I guess Morikawa kind of won the Tour Championship. I don't know how we're counting all those, but I thought it was a bummer that he didn't go out and get a win, because that noise is only going to get, louder as he gets into 2025.
Well, I thought that was the thing that the Tour Championship format stole from golf fans, was the story of a guy that like literally just was getting jammed by Scottie Scheffler's greatness all year, and then maybe clipped him at the end.
Who knows?
Who knows? Like, would it have played out differently? I think that's the other thing. Is there a Tiger effect that Scottie has, and would Sahith and Morikawa have crumbled?
Nobody mentioned Sahith, by the way. He's been awesome.
I do think that, like, that's something to watch in 2025 is like, is there a Scottie effect? I think they're starting to become one. Like, you've seen him come from behind, and part of coming from behind is other players faltering. And he had some nice come from behind wins this year. And it makes me wonder if there's this like, I think the word inevitability is being thrown out there too much. But in the case of like, it's like the Grim Reaper, right? When you see Scottie on the leaderboard late, it's like, oh no, he's going to hit some shots. Like the Olympics win was like a great example of that.
Well, I think the hard part with him is let's compare Rory and Scottie. If you see Rory coming, you're like, okay, well, there might be a 7 in there, right? And with Scottie, there's not going to be like the big mistake, and so it almost messes with you more mentally of like, I gotta get to 10 under, whatever the number is, I got to get to 12 under, because if I don't, Scottie is for sure getting there, and then that makes you that just kind of throws everybody for a loop. So I think that part of it, his game management is super underrated, and I think it messes with guys quite a bit.
Hey, let's take a quick break and talk about our membership, Club TFE. This is a great way to support what we do here at Friday Golf if you enjoy what we do, and get a ton of content for what you're paying for. It's $120 a year. We are writing roughly 3 pieces a week in there. You can expect a design notebook, a course profile, and then our tour guide in there, so we try and cover a wide range of topics between golf architecture, golf courses, and the PGA Tour, or LIV, or LPGA, whatever that may be on a given week. It's $120 for the year. You get a bunch of other benefits, such as Club TFE member-only events, 10% off the Pro Shop at Friday Pro Shop, as well as early access to our events and some videos. So if you are interested in joining, go to thefriedegg.com/membership. This really helps us do what we do, and we're excited about continuing to add to the membership, do more in there as we continue to grow. So big thank you to everybody that is a member, and hope you guys would consider joining if you're not. Let's get back to Kyle and Joseph. All right, let's jump to the next topic we wanted to get to. We're just, talking about our first 2 questions. Good thing we didn't have like 10 questions here. Kyle, what's your looming question over the PGA Tour in 2025 or 20 and beyond?
My looming question over the PGA Tour is, are you a competition product, or are you an entertainment product?
That's a good one.
Because I think they're stuck between release patterns right now. And the problem, it always goes back to this for me, is you've got the the players running the show. And the separation, there is no separation of church and state. And if that's the case, you're never going to have an identity, right? Because it's always going to be whatever the winds are blowing for the current crop of players. And if there's no identity, then you're an amoeba. You can't take any form. And I think that's where the PGA Tour is at right now, is they don't know if they're an entertainment product. They don't know if they're a meritocracy, but you also get exemptions into the best events. Like Spieth is going to play in them because he's Spieth. Like they're so hung up between what they are. And I think that lack of identity is hurting them and will hurt them more than they can tell right now.
What's the difference? If somebody said, well, it should be the same thing. If it's the most competitive product, then it is the most entertaining. Do you think there's a good counter argument to that actually, no, Jordan Spieth should be in the events because he brings a different level of an entertainment? I would take the other side, that watching him fight his way up through non-signature events actually could be the most entertaining version of the product. But do you have a different view, Kyle?
No, I think that's right. But I think what you're getting when the players are involved, the current players, is a conflation of those two things of like, well, we need to have these 4 exemptions just in case JT and, Max and whoever are not involved. And, I think what you're saying is correct. And I think a lot of times, and I don't know that management would be that much different because they're listening to sponsors. There just needs to be somebody that's like, no, this is what it is. This is the most competitive product. And that provides, or that it results in the greatest entertainment. But I think they're mixing those two, and they don't end up with either. It's like the Tour Championship. You're trying to mix the season-long race with the playoffs, and you don't end up with a good version of either one.
I'm with you, but I think a lot of it is the sponsor angle here too, Kyle, that's solidified for me this year. That part of the reason they care so much about giving a sponsor exemption to somebody like Webb Simpson or Billy Horschel is so they can play in the Pro-Am with one of those golfers versus the 55th best player on the PGA Tour that nobody knows. That feels like as much of a conflict to me as them being worried about the entertainment value of the event itself if Jordan Spieth is not involved.
Yeah, so, I totally agree.
How about that? You spend $20 million so that you can play with Webb Simpson in a pro.
But I would push back on that, Joseph, in that the answer to that is to say, okay, well, we don't want your money anyway.
Right.
To take less money, which the players don't want because the purses get smaller. And so I think it always goes back to the players like having a lot of sway, the most sway, all the sway over what those decisions are.
Would the PGA Tour be in a better spot if they just allowed appearance fees and every event could just like pay to get players there, and you had smaller purses, but you had the appearance fees, and it naturally set the market of, oh, you want to have Scottie here? Like, well, you got to pay for it. You want to have Rory, Scottie, all of them? We'll pay for it. You give them guaranteed money, and it's, I don't know. It's something I've always thought about.
I'm inclined to think that the most competitive version of the product is the best, but also like, I don't know. I'm a huge UFC fan. Conor McGregor gets to fight in super high profile events and they make a ton of money from it. And he's not the most deserving, but he's the biggest draw. And there's a clear business value there. So I could see both sides of it.
Does tennis do appearance fees, Andy? Or do we know?
Outside of like the big ones, yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Like especially like small events.
Yeah.
I think tennis is an interesting. I was thinking about this because I've been watching a lot of US Open tennis. Like a good example of, I guess, like the ATP is like super comparable to the PGA Tour. And I think the fear for the PGA Tour is that you're going towards the ATP where it's like the majors are all that anybody pays attention to. But I think like the ATP final event is like kind of a roadmap for the PGA Tour. I think it's only 8 players, right, Joseph?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That make it. If whoever wins that wins a lot of money, and it's like you won this season, but it's not like they don't do this silly handicap thing. It's not like Djokovic or Sinner or whoever's number one in the world at the time starts with a 2-set advantage.
That would be sick, though.
No, it wouldn't. It would suck.
It would suck.
It would be absurd.
But they cut it to 8, which is like any of these 8 players were okay with winning this season. I think that's the tour's biggest problem is like, they're clearly not okay with Billy Horschel or whoever's number 30 winning whoever's like really like 15 and on winning the tour championship. They're not okay with that.
Yeah.
So to me, that tells you if you're not okay with them winning, they shouldn't be there.
We made our way to tour championship talk.
Yeah, we just fell right into it.
It matters.
I think the biggest thing that's looming for me is that is what's going on with this framework agreement.
Well,
nothing.
Again, being caught in the middle, I feel like there just needs to be some resolution here. I think apathy for men's golf outside of the majors and the Ryder Cup and the Olympics is at an all-time low.
Yep.
I think the players, a tournament that the tour has spent decades building and had built into a formidable case for a major, all that work has been just like completely blown up with this division in the game of golf. I think the tour would have I think that they have value in saying we are going to invite the top 10 players from the LIV to the players. You have basically taken decades of work to build this tournament into like I would have said if the players had all the best players in the world, I would have said the players is more of a major this year than Valhalla. It's probably more of a major this year than Quail Hollow if you have all the best players in the world there. But they don't. So it is an example of taking decades of work building a tournament and just throwing it in the garbage can because you continue to live in this divided world.
President's Cup also, Andy, right?
Yeah, President's Cup, same thing. Like, I think the President's Cup at Royal Melbourne was one of the most fascinating events we've ever watched.
It was awesome.
You could see the competition level in terms of international depth and American depth getting closer than it's ever been. And now there's, that international team. If you put Joaquin Niemann and Cam Smith and maybe Mean Dean on it, like that's a formidable team that I think like if you replace the bottom players of Siwoo, Bezadenhout and
Pendrith,
or Mackenzie. If you swap those three, you might look at those two teams and be like, this is a real competition. So I think the tours they're doing irreparable harm to some of their, like, if you think about the tournaments as their own franchises, and think about the PGA Tour and their teams. Their franchises are their tournaments. They're doing irreparable harm to their franchises because of this schism. And the league value is based off their franchises, right? The league, the PGA Tour, is of course consortium of how valuable each individual tournament is.
Mm-hmm.
And right now they're doing a lot of harm to their biggest value event. So that would be my kind of thing. Like maybe they play on LIV, but like, hey, like we see that there's a huge value in having all the best players in the world together. I think you got to get to this point because if you don't, all that's happening is very similar to tennis, as we just talked about. These majors are just the only thing that matters, and the majors have been the big winner of this feud.
And that's only going to be exacerbated next year, as it was just announced the first 4 LIV events next year all run up against high-profile PGA Tour events, including the players, right? So There's no opportunity
in
for
international markets.
Right. Like it's not like the players, there's anything in the works to get some of these LIV guys playing some of these PGA Tour events. I mean, this is going up against Phoenix Open, a RIV, Bay Hill, and the Players, I believe, the first 4 LIV events. So it's not like there's anything being worked out that those golfers are going to end up over on the PGA Tour.
I think what's interesting about this is this is going to drag on so long that it's going to bump up against the renewal of a lot of these guys' contracts, right? Like
on LIV.
On LIV, yeah. Brooks and DJ and Bryson and Phil's talking about retiring. And, like I'm interested to see, there's an article in I think it was the Financial Times about the public investment funds sort of retraction of a lot of their big time global investments, not retraction, but just they're going to do less of it. And I don't like, are they going to carry on with LIV 3 years from now when they're getting 180,000 people watching the final round of a turn? I don't know. Like, are they going to renew Brooks' contract for $100 million when nothing has really happened? I don't know. I mean, maybe they do just keep dumping money into that, but I think that's something now the PGA Tour has to, or could use as leverage in their negotiation of this sort of framework deal.
That I think that's the PGA Tour's view, right? That they're going to wait this out. That feels really dangerous. And if LIV decides that they actually are committed to this, then they'll seek alternatives, like potentially some kind of partnership with the DP World Tour, right? Has there been any evidence? I know there have been articles. Has there been any evidence that LIV is not committed to continuing to pour money into this?
But here's the thing, Joseph. I don't think the PGA, I don't think they have a view. I think they're just showing up to the meetings like, well, what are we going to talk about? Like, I don't think they have a plan of like, okay, this is our view of what's going on. This is how we're going to combat. This is how we're going to do all these things, because because Tiger is like running the meetings. I think it's absurd. Like, I think
Tiger
it's totally
takes off his
absurd
Call of Duty
that you have
headset.
athletes and players running business meetings with the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. Like, I know that's not exactly how it's going, but I think that's a preposterous thing.
Yeah, it's definitely it's not an enjoyable situation for a golf fan. Just like, this isn't what you want. You don't want everything scattered about. I think the other thing is, like, it's divided golf fans, which is a bad thing. Like, you have your LIV fans, your PGA Tour fans, and then a bunch of people that don't care about either. And it's like, wake me up when the Masters come around.
Yeah.
But if everybody's playing in the same place, I think Riviera, the Players, all these individual franchises get a lot more value. Joseph, what's your topic? We've been on this too long.
Mine is the age, health, and marketability of the biggest stars on the PGA Tour. And we've kind of talked about this throughout the pod. Like, most golfers are playing their best golf, let's say ages 27 to or 26 to 33. Some of the greats make it past that, right? But Rory, one of the biggest superstars in the game, is 35. He's not going to be around forever. Hopefully he's playing another 5 to 7 good years of golf, but we'll see. Jordan Spieth is having wrist surgery this offseason. He hasn't been good in a while. The tour's got to figure out who those draws are going to be and who those needle movers are. Is Scottie one of them? I mean, he's clearly that plays at a talent level that's big enough to be a superstar. Whether or not he'll take a hold with fans in the same way that some of these other golfers are, I think remains to be seen. Bryson DeChambeau is one of the biggest stars in the game. He's not on your tour. So what's coming? I mean, who are those stars that are going to carry the mantle for the tour over the next 5 years? And is Scottie kind of the only answer to that question? So I think that's a huge question, is surveying who's going to be in 5 years as somebody that's playing at the top of the world.
I guess Ludwig would be one.
Is Ludwig going to be a superstar that attracts attention and fan interest that way?
Maybe in Scandinavia. Maybe in Sweden.
Yeah, your people over there. I think to underscore this, Joseph, I was looking up something for something I was writing the other day, and I came across the fact that next year is Ricky Fowler's age 37 season, which seems unfathomable, right? It seems crazy. But I think to take it back to tennis, I think golf is going to undergo this in the same way that tennis is kind of undergoing the post Big Three thing, or entering into it right now. Golf has entered into its post Tiger deal. And tennis is just not as it's not as compelling to like my friends who are, it's not as compelling to like the common fan who just is like interested if Federer's going to win. Right? That's so much. I think that's one thing the tour has underestimated over the last 20 years. Like half of your audience, all those numbers, all those ratings, half of those people, it was like, hey, what's Tiger doing? Is he going to win? And that's going away. Like that's not going to exist. Like a lot of my friends that just anecdotally that I talk to, they're not paying attention to the Valspar.
Unless Tiger's in it.
Right.
And Corey Connors gets USA chanted at him.
and so I think like golf and tennis are in a lot of ways kind of in the same place right now. And I don't know who golf's Alcaraz is, right? Like that's a big time like star with some person, you know, I don't know who that is on the golf side.
Yeah, you think about like I think I would fall into like the casual tennis bucket, right? Yeah. I watch US Open. I don't watch a lot of Wimbledon because it's like on at hours that don't work well for the West Coast. Mm-hmm. So I watch pretty much the US Open. And like if you ask me to like rattle off tennis players, young tennis players, I can rattle off like a ton. There's that Rune kid that looked awful on the Netflix, like made him look terrible. There's Alcaraz, Sinner, Tiafoe, Taylor Fritz, like Shelton. Like I can rattle those off. Like this is the issues. Like, can somebody do that for young golfers?
Well, I think what you said is interesting because I think the next several young stars are going to come out of like a Netflix type thing. Like people are going to be attracted to your Tom Kims or your Sahiths or your whoever. I don't know who it would be, but I think there's a possibility that happens.
I don't know if golf and Netflix is going to happen the third year.
True.
The other piece I think is important is if Alcaraz is good, he could be good for 15 years, right? I mean, Novak Djokovic is still playing elite tennis. Golf, I don't know if you're going to see a lot of 10 to 15 year careers going forward with how much speed is being emphasized. And there have been a lot of injuries this year. I think that's been an underappreciated part of this year. It's not just Spieth with his wrist injury. Zalatoris has dealt with a back injury. Scottie had some neck discomfort. Hideki's dealt with issues.
Hideki's always hurt.
Fitzpatrick. But I mean, you could rattle off 10 to 15 golfers who have had injuries at some point this year. I think that's something that golf at least needs to consider is are these windows, if they're only going to be 5 to 8 years and you only get a star every once in a while, it'd certainly be better if you get them for 15 years.
You know, I think one of the things that the tour probably should be considering is how do they build stars faster? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they have the content chops to do it. Like if you watch PGA Tour socials, this is not like it's a hard job, but like I think there needs to be significant investment in how are we going to make people interested in Sam Burns
or college golfers, maybe, right? So you start to build making the NCAAs more special.
I think part of the problem with that, Andy, is people look at golf as so binary. Did you win or did you not? And if you looked at basketball like that, then Anthony Edwards wouldn't be a superstar, right? He hasn't won a Western Conference Finals. He hasn't won an NBA title. Like, I think there has to be like some looking outside of just the guys who win events Like Ludwig, for example, didn't win this year, but that doesn't mean he's not a star. I think the sort of synthesizing of players down into like, did you win or did you not, is not. I think it's bad for golf.
Well, I think the other way that people gain recognizability is the way Ludwig, I think, is a known commodity because of the Masters and the Ryder Cup.
Team stuff.
So if you think about it that way, like, how are people building stars? Like, I don't think that the common golf fan knows that much about Nick Dunlap because he won the Amex and what was his other
Barracuda.
one? Barracuda. I don't think those. I think if Nick Dunlap finished third at the Open and was contending late, people would be like, yeah, that guy's good. Or if he played in the President's Cup and had like a great President's Cup, people might know him. I don't know about President's Cup. That might have been a bridge too far. I don't even believe that take.
I can see you trying to talk yourself into it, though.
If he played in the Ryder Cup and had a great Ryder Cup, people would know who he was. I think even like the Players is the only tournament to me on the PGA Tour calendar. Maybe Kapalua. Kapalua has I think Kapalua, the time it's on and the time of year it's on, it does capture a big net of people.
I'd be curious how many casual fans are tuning into Kapalua.
I think Kapalua is like a needle mover, to be honest.
What's our last question?
What is the last question, Joseph?
And overall, what do you think of the 2024 product? We've hit on it throughout times, but do you have any overarching thoughts?
My only other take on this, and I've wrote about this, I think, for the Normal Sport newsletter, but the season should end at the Open. And I know people disagree with this. I think you can move the Open back into August, a couple weeks, and that's where the season should end. That's like a natural ending point. Sometimes I talk to like my kids and my wife about this stuff to get like a different perspective, because we're in it all day and we're too close to it. And it's like like my wife always complains about the playoffs and the Tour Championship, because it's like post Super Bowl, you're playing more games that you're trying to get people to care about. But you're like, well, I already watched the most important game. Like, why would I watch the games after this that are still part of this season?
Why would I watch the Pro Bowl?
Exactly. That's what it is, kind of. And I just think that is like, and I get that there's so many different organizations involved and you got to get them all on the same page. And that's very difficult. I just think it's bad for the product. I think it makes the product bad that your most important stuff, if we're calling it that, comes after arguably the biggest and most important event of the year, which is the Open.
I would agree with that. I think the issue is going to continue to be until, and this is like, I guess this is like the case for the tour to get the Saudi money done. So you have the money to do this, but this is going to be the issue for the PGA Tour, and it's unique to the PGA Tour compared to the other large sports leagues outside of tennis, where they just don't own anything that's actually valuable.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how it's a hard situation. I do actually like sympathize. It's a hard, like, I don't know what you would do if you don't. So if you don't own any of the most valuable sport properties in your sport, you would think that your overarching emphasis would have to be product focused, because it has to be like, how can we potentially build one of these? And to me, that's the ass backwards thing about the PGA Tour. is that none of the focus is ever on the product.
I think the product's been they've tried, like they would say that they've made radical changes to the product, right? But that's probably where, say, actually the schedule does look a lot like the schedule from 2022. Like the signature events model is not a radical change. It's a change, but it's not a drastic change to what the product has looked like. My overarching thoughts from this year were that the signature events need to be a little bit bigger, because I don't think they captured people's enthusiasm. I heard from a lot of golf fans this year who said that they have watched way less PGA Tour golf than in any year previous. And that's in a year that Scottie Scheffler was a huge story. You kind of caught a windfall of like a once in a 25-year period season, one of the best seasons of the 21st century, and ratings are still down. Like, what my question to the PGA Tour would be, and I think this hits on what you're saying, Andy, like, why do you expect 2025 to be better than 2024? And I don't think 2024 was a rousing success.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They're kind of at I feel like a very important point in their history, evolution, and I don't know where it goes. I
think it'd be interesting to see what it would look like for them to double down on the Players Championship, right? To like, this is just half baked and something I thought of while we were talking here. But what if you did move it back to May and you just made your PGA Tour season January to May, and then said, you guys do whatever you want in the summer. Like, those are the majors and you can go play elsewhere. But to me, the Players is like by far the best thing the PGA Tour has under its umbrella of stuff. Like, it's not even close. I think the Players is awesome. And to double down on that and make it like your, whatever you want to call it, like Super Bowl or whatever, I think would be a radical change. That would be interesting. I don't know if it would work, but it would certainly be a deviation from what they've been doing.
And then the PGA goes back to August.
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch of golf courses in the Midwest and northern climates that rejoice about potentially being able to host a major again.
And you wouldn't have to start the season in January. I know it's been suggested you could even do some events in the late fall, right? That are international events.
Yeah.
That maybe are a little sleepy, but that's fine for the beginning of your season to be a little sleepy. It can't be the end of your season that's sleepy. So, I mean, that seems like a reasonable solution.
And I think, like, the thing is, if you do a short sprint, players are going to do everything they can to be ready for the short sprint, which means they're going to play in the fall.
But you think about other sports, there's not really an example of a league or an organization shortening the season. Everybody's going for more volume, more money, more.
NBA, I think the NBA is at least evaluating that, because they've got a problem.
That's what I'm saying. Everybody should, but the NFL gets longer. The Major League Baseball adds team to the play. Like, everybody's like add, and I think subtracting could actually bring about some value for one of these organizations.
All right, I think we can end there. That's maybe less is more. Is the
as we go an hour and a half.
Kyle, big thanks coming on. Everybody should sign up for the Normal Sporter. Your is it weekly? Sometimes more than once a week?
Or twice a week usually.
Yeah, I would describe it as a sometimes more than weekly publication. How do they sign up?
Normalsport.com. We got that URL, and you can just go there and sign up.
That's a fancy URL.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks as always for coming on and talking about big topics like we did today. And everybody should sign up for your newsletter. And we'll be back next week with some new Fried Egg Pods. All right. Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fried Egg Golf Podcast. Big thanks to Kyle for coming on, and Joseph. This episode was edited and produced by PJ Clark. We'll be back next week with a couple episodes of the pod, and hope you guys have a great fall. welcome to September. This is a great golf month. So get out, play some golf, enjoy the little bit cooler temperatures, and the best month, in my opinion, for golf in America. All right. Thanks.